Hello everyone, and welcome to Student Economist, where choosing to spend your time here is infinitely better than your opportunity cost. So now guys, welcome back. I've been missing for a while. I've taken an hiatus from YouTube, and that's really because of, struggles balancing YouTube and school. But I'm back and I'm here with a CAPE past paper in your face right now. CAPE Economics Unit 2, Paper 2, 2022. Let's begin. Let's get on that path to your one and your potential placement. So now, first question. Distinguish between a command economy and a free market economy. So now for this question, I'd like to start off with just definitions. So let's see. A command or centrally planned economy refers to an economic system where all economic decisions regarding what, how, and for whom scarce resources are allocated are made by the central planning authorities or the government. On the other hand, a free market or market economy is an economic system based in Adam Smith's theory of laissez-faire economics, where all economic decisions are taken by individual firms and households without government intervention. With the free market, economic decisions are made by private individuals based on the profit motive, self-interest, with prices dictated by market forces of supply and demand, with the government only maintaining law and order. This is where the juxtaposition comes in now. The command economy, on the other hand, prioritizes the welfare of each system with a distinct focus on national interests and the government playing an integral role dictating aspects of the economy such as wages. So here we can see the three main ways how we distinguished. So one, we spoke about the profit motive in the free market juxtaposed with the prioritization of welfare of each citizen. We juxtapose the self-interest nature of the free market against national interest of the command system, and we also look at the fact that there is little to no government intervention in the free market, and really prices are determined by the price mechanism of supply and demand, while the planned economy, the government is heavy in their intervention, and this is indicated by their influence in wages in the labor market. Now moving on. With aid of a diagram, explain how prices are adjusted to re-establish equilibrium in a free market economy following a contraction in supply. Now firstly, let's read the question. You have to ensure that with the aid of a diagram, explain how prices are adjusted to re-establish equilibrium in a free market economy following a contraction in supply. So in the question it says a free market economy. So you have to ensure that your mind doesn't wander to anything like taxes or subsidies, because a free market economy and what we just established up there lets us know that we can't speak about taxes or subsidies because there's no government intervention in a free market. Now ensure that your graph is set up nicely, positive relationship shown in your supply curve with price and quantity supplied, inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded shown by your demand curve. Your price must be indicated on your y-axis and your quantity supplied and demanded on your x-axis. Let's go into the response. A contraction in the supply curve refers to a downward movement along the supply curve caused by a decrease in the price of a certain good. Definition. This contraction, indicated by the arrow on the supply curve, shows a decrease in price from PE to P1, which results in a decrease in quantity supplied, that is from QE going down to Q1. This is in accordance to the positive relationship between price and quantity supplied dictated in the law of supply. So this is just to ensure that whatever you're saying is backed in economic theory. This also means that for the firm, the good produced is less profitable, therefore they are inclined to produce less. So with the supply curve, you have to notice that it refers to the producer. And what the producer looks at is profit, while the consumer on the demand side looks at satisfaction. So as prices decrease, this is essentially the producer losing profit in real time. And obviously, if you were in the economically rational mind of the producer, you would not want to produce more or produce at the same number if your price is going down. That means that you'll have less profit. So that's essentially what this statement is saying. Let's continue. However, with the free market's price mechanism due to market forces, there is a greater quantity demanded of Q2 at the price of P1. So at P1, you're seeing that there is too much demand at that price because it's low. That's in accordance with the law of demand. As price falls, quantity demanded raises. So now, the firm using the rationing function of the price mechanism will bid up the price P1 back to PE, where it is more profitable, with a quantity demanded of QE, which is effective demand. That is simply demand that is backed by the willingness and the ability to actually pay. Yeah. So let's go down to the next question. Analyze how knowledge of each of the following can benefit a car manufacturer: income elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand, and cross price elasticity of demand. So for each one, we break down what needs to be said, we talk about the definition, and then we, rationalize it to speak to the benefits. And ensure that you always, 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 when they give you a certain prompt, you ensure that you integrate that prompt into how you're expressing yourself. So let's go ahead. Income elasticity of demand refers to the degree of responsiveness of the quantity demanded of a certain good or service to the change in consumers' income. Taking the economic conditions of a car manufacturer, it is important to note that knowledge of YED, especially in a country with positive economic conditions with rising incomes, is advantageous. This is so as cars are seen as luxury goods to most and as normal goods to a smaller contingent of that population. However, if a car manufacturer sets up shop in a country where incomes are rising, it is highly likely that he or she will experience good returns in terms of profit if the YED of the population towards cars is seen as positive. Positive indicating that cars are normal goods, and also if the YED figure is over 1, which indicates high elasticity, which shows their responsiveness in quantity demanded to an increase in real income. Moving on to price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand refers to the degree of responsiveness in quantity demanded to the changes in price. Now, knowledge of price elasticity of demand is advantageous in the sense that it would allow the car manufacturer to be aware of how best they can leverage their total revenue and total expenditure with their elasticity of demand. Now, looking at goods that are inelastic, those are goods that the PED is less than 1. These are the goods where the consumer is not responsive to price changes. Therefore, if this car manufacturer is able to create a car or vehicle that has a niche consumer base, that's like maybe if it's like a certain vehicle that is, higher end, or maybe appeals to a certain subsection of people, essentially with the niche, it will be able to convince its consumer base to view the vehicle as a necessity. And I go on to say that they would be able to benefit from the fact that these goods have an inelastic demand, which tend to have increases in total revenue and total expenditure. This is so as a proportionately lower amount of consumers are foregoing the purchase of the cars in comparison to the proportionately higher increase in price for these cars. So essentially, because of the inelastic demand, because they have this need to purchase this car, I'm saying that with need with quotation marks, this need to purchase this car, you find that less people are saying, you know what, I'm not gonna buy the car, and there's a greater amount of and there's a greater increase in price in comparison to the smaller amount of people who are saying, no, I'm not gonna buy this car. So overall, if the car manufacturer can capitalize on making vehicles or cars with an inelastic demand, he stands to make more profits as he raises the price. Lastly, we're going to look at cross elasticity of demand, which refers to the demand of the degree, of responsiveness of the quantity demanded of one commodity in response to the change in price of a related commodity. Knowledge again of cross elasticity of demand is especially beneficial for complements. These are goods that are used jointly in consumption. So that's like butter and cheese, you know, things of that nature. So if a car manufacturer is aware of the implications of the cross elasticity of demand on complements, he would utilize the quantity demanded of the car and leverage it against the price of a related commodity. So now, take for instance, there is an increase in the price of the car, which evidently reduces the quantity demanded for said cars. A manufacturer would now look to how he can leverage the price of gas, maybe, which is a complement good to a car. So now, if the manufacturer comes out with a statement saying that the price of gas at ABC Gas Limited is 20% lower for 8 years after buying any of his cars, he'll be able to counteract that dramatically greater fall in quantity demanded of the cars by sorry, leveraging an exclusive lowered gas price for all buyers of his cars. So essentially, it's a little bit of a bargaining thing. So if he notices that the price of his car is going up, right? That would obviously have inverse impacts on his quantity demanded. So people are gonna buy less cars because the car is higher. The price of the car is higher. So now he can look at the complement, which is gas, and say, okay, if people are gonna not buy because it is high, because the price of the car is higher, what I can do is reduce the price for a complement, which essentially would incentivize the consumers to actually buy the car because they're getting the cheaper gas for 8 years. So you'll be able to leverage that. Yes. Okay. Now we're in module 2. Module 2 says, first question 2, distinguish between productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. So now we're gonna give our definitions and make our juxtaposition again. So now, productive efficiency refers to a situation where firms are producing the maximum output for a given amount of inputs, operating with no excess capacity. That is at the lowest point of the AC curve. Also refers to producing a given amount or a given input, at the least cost. That is the least cost combination of factors for a given output. On the other hand, this is how we show the juxtaposition. Allocative efficiency refers to a situation where the current combination of goods and services produced and sold gives maximum satisfaction for each customer at their current levels of income. And this is where, at the prevailing market price, consumer and producer surpluses are maximized. And this is where price equals marginal cost. I stop here to say that where productive and allocative efficiency both happen is something known as Pareto efficiency. It comes from this Italian economist. His last name is Pareto, but that's besides the point. But yes, where you have productive efficiency and allocative efficiency, usually found on a PPF, it will result in Pareto efficiency or optimality. And to add to the definition of allocative efficiency, you also have to look at something key about allocative efficiency, where it is really the utopic or the best combination where if you rearrange it in any other way, some person is gonna be left worse off. So that's something you can also add to your definition of allocative efficiency. Okay, moving on. With the aid of a diagram, explain how market failure is caused by a monopoly. Now, again, I think you guys see the structure that Cape likes to ask questions that are eerily related to each other, and then as you go down, as you do the paper, the one question falls into another, and you're able to catch a little pattern and see what they're asking you. So essentially, what they ask you the first question usually comes out in the second question. So now, when they ask about market failure and a monopoly, you draw your monopoly graph. So you show your MR curve, your demand curve, which is equal to your AR curve, and note that all prices come from the AR curve, right? So you have to ensure that you make that distinction that the demand curve is also known as the AR curve. And for this one, I showed that they made abnormal profits. So I ensured that, the AC curve is cutting the MC curve at its minimum. And this will be important later. But I also ensured that ensure that I start my output is where MR equal MC. So right there where MR and MC are have there's a intersection right there. That is my profit maximizing point. That's a profit maximizing rule right there. So now it goes straight through all the way up to the AR curve, and I derive my price, right? And then through this profit maximizing line right here, so to speak, I will where it touches the AC curve, extrapolate to the y-axis. Ensure to label your y and x-axis. Your y-axis should have price slash cost, while your x-axis should say output, right? So now we have set up everything and we are ready to start the question. Always start off with the definitions. So market failure refers to the inability of the price mechanism to allocate scarce resources efficiently, or where operations of the market forces of supply and demand lead to a net welfare loss. So I put at the side, which is SMB is not equal to SMC. So this is where social marginal benefit is not equal to social marginal cost. So wherever there's an inequality between the two, that is also market failure. I saw that on one of the specimen papers, the responses, so that is also an acceptable definition for market failure. So now we give them the definition of a monopoly. This is where you get your knowledge marks. So a monopoly exists when there's only one single firm dominating the industry. It is the same dominance that leads to a market failure, partial market failure, as monopolies are notorious for underproduction and charging higher prices than the price that would exist under normal or regular conditions of competition. The diagram proves that a monopoly leads to market failure as it lacks economic efficiency. I should put efficiency, not inefficiency. Yes, it lacks economic efficiency. Economic efficiency occurs when, it's the same thing as Pareto efficiency, where productive and allocative efficiency is achieved at the same time. In the diagram, the monopoly is seen as productively inefficient as it produces where MR equals MC, productively inefficient, so we're talking about where you're producing with excess capacity, you're not producing at the lowest cost. So yes, it produces where MR equal MC, therefore the monopoly incurs a cost, that's C right there, which is greater than the minimum of the AC curve. And that is where I said that would be important, because If you're not producing at the minimum point of AC, that means you're producing with excess capacity, which means that you're productively inefficient. So as long as the AC curve is along the profit maximizing line is not cutting through the minimum, it is not productively efficient. Okay, and I said right here it's greater than the AC curve, minimum of the AC curve. And I said operating with excess capacity. Furthermore, allocative efficiency is achieved where price is equal to MC, where consumer welfare producer surplus is maximized at the prevailing market price. However, this monopoly produces a Q1, right, where MR equal MC, and then as you can see, price is greater than marginal cost. Marginal cost right here where it cuts the MR equal MC line is all the way down here. However, price is all the way up here. So that shows allocative inefficiency. And overall, this reduces consumers' welfare as the price is set at, obviously, at P. Now, let's go on. This is a very lengthy question, but we will get through it. It's very fun. More market failure. Discuss how the government can use each of the following measures to control market failure. 1. Taxation. 2. State ownership. And 3. Antitrust policy. So now we'll go through each one, right? So let's go with taxation. Firstly, a government can begin to regulate or correct market failure by using taxation. Taxes usually have the effect of reducing the quantity of a good produced in a market, while at the same time reallocating the resources employed in the production of that particular good to other goods or services. And oftentimes, this is a merit good, for which the government wishes to increase production. So, merit goods are goods that are essentially created for the benefit of society. There is usually a production of positive externalities, which are spillover benefits to the third party. Okay. In practicality, taxation can be applied in two ways: as a percentage tax, that's an ad valorem tax, or as a specific tax. Both methods aim to address and effectively mitigate negative externalities and or increase revenue towards government expenditure towards the provision of merit goods. Again, these are the goods that give you positive externalities, and essentially you with these goods that you need to apply taxation to, they often come with some overproduction, overconsumption. So these are things like goods like, for example, like services like mining. If you obviously mine, you'll be able to come up with some negative externalities that stem from pollution. And if we're able to tax them and get some government expenditure coming in from them, we'll be able to allocate that money back to proper health facilities to sort of equal out the welfare loss. And this is what we talk about with merit goods. Ad valorem tax work well when mitigating the effects of demerit goods like cigarettes that cause negative externalities due to habitual use, where the percentage tax increases with consumption and the proceeds would be used to fund healthcare programs. So, with cigarettes, where you continuously buy over and over, with a percentage tax, it increases steadily, as the quantity increases. So that is why it would be advantageous for habitual use type of goods. Moving on, specific taxes which charge a fixed amount per unit of a good or service is most effective for like gasoline, which can be taxed per gallon in the interest of adverse adverse environmental implications, and from the taxation proceeds there can be investment into infrastructure projects. So again, for this question, you see that we use a lot of examples to bring out our points, and we also speak to, that transfer of funds from the taxation from the same demerit good, tax the demerit good, which is giving us negative externalities, and use those taxes to get us some nice merit goods, which would give us some positive externalities. Now we move into state ownership. So wait, hold on, let me slide over. Yeah. So state ownership, or even nationalization, refers to a form of government of direct provision where the government intervenes directly in the production and distribution of a certain industry or firm by taking control of said firm by initially providing this good. But no, let me go again. So, state ownership or nationalization refers to a form of government of wow. State ownership or nationalization refers to a form of direct provision where the government intervenes directly in the production and distribution of a certain industry or firm by taking control of said firm or by initially in the start just providing this good. With this control, the government will have the complete decision on how much, for whom, and how to produce a certain good in accordance to society's desired amount of output. This approach is often utilized for certain industries that are seen as public goods, where the citizens suffer from a missing market, as the private individuals meaning the people who provide these goods, by the way. So these private individuals who assumably are driven by the profit motive will opt not to produce these public goods due to an inability to exclude non-paying customers from consuming these goods, which is the free rider problem. And remember, with public goods, we're talking about three things. We're talking about non-excludability, non-diminishable, non-diminishable, it's more than three things. Sorry. So non-excludability, non-diminishable, non-rival, and zero priced. So these are the four things you have to keep in mind with a pure public good. So essentially, with you being unable to exclude customers, non-paying customers from consuming the good, you obviously face the free rider problem. And because no private firm who's driven by profit wants to face the free rider problem where you're not getting money for the good that you're providing, they would opt just not to produce the good at all. And this produces a complete market failure. There's no provision of the goods in regards to in accordance to how society wants it. However, there are instances when private individuals still provide the good, like for example with public transport. However, there is still an underproduction of the service, which results in a partial market failure. So there is an instance where public and private individuals will still provide a good, but it's not to the level that society truly wants it, and it still results in a partial market failure. Remember the thing I showed you about social marginal benefit being not equal to social marginal cost. So as long as they're in this equilibrium, you cannot have a fully functioning market. It has to be market failure. So now we can look at the example of the statutory body of JUTC, Jamaica Urban Transit Company in Jamaica, where they nationalized the industry of public transport to an extent, aiming to provide public transport at the lowest cost in the market, or lowest price in the market, so that's close to zero price. It is being non-excludable to an extent because of the very low price, non-diminishable in terms of the number of buses provided around the clock. That's on paper. But this in a sense mitigates the most of the market failure, as production of the public transport under state ownership matches or comes close to society's desired output. So we essentially showed how state ownership or nationalization, well, I must make this distinction that state ownership is essentially, it could be considered where a industry or a firm is owned solely by the government from start to finish. There is no exchange from no private individual to the government. But I chose to include nationalization because that is still in an extent state ownership. So I ensured to add that to the definition. Remember, in the examination, you can never write too much. So you have to ensure that you put as much as you can possibly put to show the examiner that you know what you're speaking about. So yes, that is what we're doing. We're using, back to the example of JUTC, we're using the JUTC, even though it's not a pure public good, it is still a public good in the sense that public transport is something that everyone needs access to. And because, the government still puts a price on it, I can't really say it's zero price, but it's still the lowest in the market because you have other private firms like, the coastal buses, the taxis that would still charge higher, but the JUTC is still the cheapest thing. And it's non-excludable in that sense because most people can afford $30, $100, and it's non-diminishable, should be non-diminishable in the sense that buses, based on their timetable, should be running straight throughout most of the day, most of the work week. So it should be accessible to everyone, and you should not be, if you take a bus, it shouldn't be depriving someone else of the ability to take a bus because there's so many buses available. So that's also the non-rival aspect. I forgot to mention it, but you should also mention that. Okay, let's go down to antitrust policies. Antitrust policies are regulations that encourage competition by limiting the market power of any particular firm. This often is done by ensuring that mergers and acquisitions don't lead to the creation of a firm with a highly concentrated market share. Furthermore, these antitrust policies are passed to effectively prevent or dismantle the formation of monopolist markets, cartels, or aggressive oligopolistic markets. These antitrust policies are important to the correction of market failure, as they protect consumers from the ills of monopolies. This is allocative inefficiency, where price is greater than marginal cost. So this is where, at this prevailing market price, consumer surplus or welfare, producers' welfare is not maximized, and it it is in a situation where the combination of goods are rearranged in a way where certain people are left worse off. So that is the allocative inefficiency part, and underproduction. So those are things that come from monopolies, and without the antitrust policies, without them, we can see that cartels like the colluding oil oligopoly OPEC, who uses, I believe, explicit collusion, would be able to behave much like a profit maximizing monopoly by restricting the world's oil supply and thus dictate higher prices, which is allocatively inefficient, causing partial market failure. So we see how OPEC works, where they put all of the world's greatest oil producers together in one big colluding oligopoly, which essentially works as a monopoly and allows for them to be the price makers, the price setters. And this is by their restriction of the output, because they have basically control over the unique good of oil, which is so imperative in all our lives. Because they have the control over that, and we have this inelastic demand towards it, they manipulate that by restricting the output, increasing the price, So they'll be able to dictate these higher prices because, with the shortage, the price goes up. That would be their justification for raising it. But also, we have an inelastic demand towards it, which causes us to pay higher prices, which diminishes consumers' welfare. Now, we're in the last section of the paper. Now we're going to look at module 3, that is distribution theory. Now, module 3, quick and easy, first part, list the four rewards of the factors of production: wages, rent, interest, profit. Done deal. Moving on, with the aid of a diagram and assuming that the market is in equilibrium, explain how migration affects the wage rate and the unemployment level in the home low-income country. So now, I actually labeled my axes this time, and on the y-axis there's price, on the x-axis there's the quantity of labor. So now we have to ensure that we label our demand curve to be the marginal revenue product of labor, and we ensure that the supply curve, we show our supply curve, and remember that we're talking about the labor market, so we would have to, when we're speaking about quantity, we're talking about labor. When we're speaking about price, it's really wages. So it should not be price here. Let me change that. But it should not be price. It actually should be wages. So never make that mistake. It's essentially the cost of labor is wages. So yes, that's what we do right there. So let's get into our explanation. So migration is referred to as the opportunity for workers in the home country to live and work overseas. When the people of a country go to live and work overseas, there is a corresponding effect on the home country's labor supply. Labor supply refers to the number of hours people are willing and able to supply their labor at a given wage rate. In the diagram above, the market supplies labor at WE with a quantity of QL. However, as indicated on the diagram, there is an influx of migration from the home country to elsewhere. Economically speaking, migration is a non-price factor affecting the labor supply. Therefore, it causes the market equilibrium to shift to the left. So as you see, it shifts from S to S1, sorry. This reduces labor supply at all wage rates from S to S1, and the reduction in labor supply places upward pressure on the wage rate, moving it from WE to W1. So this is the upward pressure on the wage, and it increases it. With the increased wage rate, firms at W1 will therefore demand less labor, as shown by the decrease in the quantity of labor demanded in the diagram from QL to QN. As you can see, the quantity demanded, as you can see, it's literally going down, going up the demand curve to show that there is a contractionary movement along the curve, to show that the quantity demanded is decreasing from QL to QN. And that's where you get your 9 marks right there. Now we are on the last leg, last lap. So now evaluate each of the following measures of poverty by defining the measure and outlining how it is used. Your evaluation must include one advantage and one disadvantage of each measure. 1. We have the basic needs approach. 2. The head count. 3. The Human Development Index, HDI. Okay. The basic needs approach with regards to poverty seeks to define the absolute minimum resources needed to sustain long-term well-being. This is often expressed through the use of a basket of consumption goods that are seen as essential goods and services. that we're looking at education, healthcare, food, and shelter. The basic needs approach looks to see if citizens are able to afford these basic goods. So now we're gonna go over to the advantages and disadvantages. So one, the measure is advantageous in the sense that it sets a simple benchmark of basic needs that must be available to all humans. Therefore, it can be used to effectively measure the occurrence of absolute poverty in nations. So we're able to compare between. However, it has the disadvantage of being there is a difficulty to accurately quantify healthcare and education as basic needs. So those are that one advantage and one disadvantage. Let's move on to head count. So head count, or the head count index indicated by PO, refers to a measure which indicates the proportion of the number of poor people in a nation to the number of to the total population as a percentage. It often works by conducting a survey, then tabulating the figures of poor to the total population and calculating using the formula number of poor over total population times 100. This measure is advantageous as it is easy to measure. However, it is not very valuable from an analytical standpoint because it does not indicate how poor people are. Okay, last one. HDI. HDI, or Human Development Index, is a measure of the country's average achievements in the three basic measures of human development. That is life expectancy, educational attainment, that is the literacy rate, and adjusted real income. It looks at the quality of life, welfare, and level of development. The HDI is measured using a numerical index from 0 to 1, with 1 being the highest possible human development. So now we go into the advantages and disadvantages. Due to the numerical nature of the HDI, it does allow economists to easily compare one nation's level of human development to another. However, it can be argued that HDI is too restrictive and not really inclusive as it only considers these only three aspects. Well, that was the 2022 paper 2 for CAPE Economics. We're finished. We're done with this. It was a lovely paper. But I do hope you have learned something from this. Always remember that the price to learn is 0, so raise the demand for excellence.